Well, they've finally done it. They finally abandoned the old ways and looked towards a brave new tomorrow. They've finally taken artificial intelligence and machine learning and combined them into a neural net that runs within your digital audio workstation to create AI-powered distortion plugins. And I, for one, welcome our new robot overlords. Hey, what's up everyone? We're back with a plugin review. It's a very new concept and it's from a company called Fazertone. What they're doing is they're using AI modeling to create distortion pedals, and I will be reviewing their Overdrive Essentials package. That's the 9 pedals that they've come out with so far. I could tell you what these are analogs of, but I think that you could tell just by looking at them what you'd be getting in the 9 pedal package. And I was just fascinated because the idea of using machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think seems like the next step in plugin development, and it looks like the next step is here and Fazertone is doing it. So I reached out to Fazertone and I asked them if they could tell me what the secret sauce was of using AI modeling to create distortion plugins, and their chief engineer Victor got back to me and he gave me an excellent answer, and I will just read it for you verbatim. He said that traditional white box emulation on the market uses circuit simulation techniques that involve studying the circuit itself to create a system of equations that attempts to approximate its true behavior. This approach works great for simple linear circuits, but can get very cumbersome, inefficient, and inaccurate for more complicated circuits with a lot of non-linear behavior. It is only as good as the mathematical models of your electronic components and will still require a lot of manual tweaks and intervention to run in real time. Now, what does this mean? Let me just put up a picture of a tube screamer circuit, and that's courtesy of Electro Smash, so thank you guys. And here's a picture of a big muff circuit. Now, there may be analogs for this in Overdrive Essentials, I don't know. But as you can see, everything in that circuit, there's capacitors, there's potentiometers, there's transistors, and what do? Well, they all affect the current in some way. What you're doing with code is attempting to approximate what happens when it passes through each of those components with code and with digital signal processing. And you can do it if the circuit is simple, but the more complex the circuit gets, the harder it is. Then Victor went on to describe black box emulation, and here I'm quoting him. He says, there's also black box emulation involving taking measurements of the physical device and using those to emulate its behavior. For instance, guitar amp impulse models. Impulse responses, however, don't capture the non-linear behavior of the device and don't allow you to change the parameters. It's a static snapshot of the device. More sophisticated black box emulation, such as that from Acoustica Audio, solves the first problem to some extent at the cost of processing power and memory requirements, but not the second. So they have to capture a snapshot for each possible device setting. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, let me just show you real quick. Here in my samples drive folder, I have a folder of impulse responses, and we can go in, and here's a 1960A cabinet from Marshall. It's from the company Redwire, and they're fine impulse responses. So I click through these folders, and I have all these different mics. So if I want to imagine what a guitar cabinet would sound like with an RE20 on it, I click in, well, I get all of these static positions. Now I can load these into my impulse response loader in Cubase, but if I want to change from cap at 3 inches to cap edge at 6 inches, I'm going to have to load a brand new impulse response. You can't just change it parametrically. Now, that is the limitation of convolution or impulse responses, or black box emulation as Victor calls it. However, impulse responses have always been my favorite way to emulate cabinets within a DAW setting. So finally, let's move on to what Victor said was AI-based modeling. He said, AI-based approaches, however, can learn directly from physical gear and learn to reproduce the circuit behavior from the audio itself, including parameter changes. You're not stuck to whichever settings you captured with typical black box modeling, and you also naturally model all the imperfections, warmth, and non-linearities of the physical device. The downside is that you need to capture a lot of data, and training the AI requires massive amounts of processing power, i.e. renting expensive GPU instances in the cloud. Once that's done, processing is fairly fast and requires very little memory, although you do need your own neural network engine as the big ones are too slow for real-time audio. I have users stacking my plugins on dozens of tracks on 10-year-old computers without issue. We're working on making it even more efficient still. Okay, that was a mouthful, but that explains the AI process. You sort of get the benefits of convolution with also the analog nature of circuit modeling, and it's sort of the best of both worlds in a plugin. And I think that it's time to dive into this project so I can show you how exactly I used Fazertone and the Overdrive Essentials package in this little composition that I've done. So we'll start off by looking at the mix console, and if I pull down my inserts panel, you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 instances of Overdrive Essentials running in this project. Now, I will say it is a little bit resource hungry, because if you look at my ASIO guard down here, it is running relatively high. Of course, that also includes the CPU used for my screen recorder and monitoring myself out of Cubase in real time. So that's why we're seeing the real-time meter here. But it does tax the ASIO guard a bit, but I would never in a template have 18 distortion pedals running. I just did it in this one to prove that you can stack over a dozen of these Overdrive Essential plugins. And let's start to listen to some of them. So we'll start with the Rhodes here, because that's how we start the composition. Let me solo defeat myself on my talkback channel so that I can talk while we're listening to the Rhodes. And we'll go to our audio inserts, and we see that there's just one Overdrive Essentials here. And we'll listen to the Rhodes in solo. Sounds pretty good. Now let's bypass the Overdrive Essentials. So what are we using on this specific track? We're using the NARC. You can see, I kept the volume the same, the filter the same, and one thing that's nice is when you're not using guitar signals, you can dial back dry and wet to get a bit of parallelism. And so some of the dry signal of the Rhodes is coming through, but some of the wet signal is coming through as well. You can also adjust input and output gain, and those are global controls regardless of which one that you choose. So again, we'll listen to this and then we'll listen to it bypassed. So we're getting a nice distortion effect there. And then next, we'll look at guitars that are sort of light guitars. So what I'll do is I'll solo the guitars here and we'll listen to them. And in this first section, we have arpeggiation with just these two tracks. So we can look here. And this is just a blues overdrive. It's more wet than the Rhodes was, but since it's cleaner tone, and if we bypass this, now we can listen to the other rhythm guitar. And this is using the clone, and this one is a very nice plugin. I really enjoyed using this. I think it adds some stuff that a lot of traditional overdrives don't, really. Okay, so also in this first section, I did an Indian flute type deal. And obviously I put those just on the full bus, so we can listen to the Indian flute. And if we go to the track, there's two stacked Overdrive Essentials. The first is a fuzz pedal called the Arbiter, and the second is the Ultra Overdrive. If we bypass these, this is what it sounds like. So adding a bit of subtle distortion and the ability to stack, and as you can see, the dry wet is way down on the Indian flutes because we don't want to add too much, we don't want to blast them out. But you can, if you wanted to. This is what it would sound like with the full bore. So you can handle a lot of instruments you wouldn't suspect and just add some subtle distortion to them with these stomp boxes, you know, from a Rhodes to Indian flutes with subtle amounts of distortion, because it does give you a wet dry knob and you can stack. And some of the pedals like the clone or the tube screamer or even the fuzz face or the arbiter, I probably shouldn't call it the fuzz face. Some of those, I think they handle lower gain stuff better than maybe like the orange distortion pedal, the DS1 clone. So that's great, but let's listen to what you would probably end up using distortion pedals for, which is, you know, something heavy. So I did a section where we had, you know, heavy guitars and drums and stuff. So if we solo this, and we're using the Obsession pedal, we can bypass that. And we're using a level boost from the Tube Screamer. And here's what just the amp sounds like. So from clean to very nice overdriven rhythm tones. So on the other hand, on the left-hand track, we can listen to the rhythm section. And this is the same amp, the clean amp with the DS1 or distortion, and a screamer doing the same boost function. And that's stacking the pedals. And then all together it sounds like this. So it works for traditional rhythm, and then we can listen to how it would sound for lead. Here is the lead that's very vibrato intensive. And that's this DS1 and a Tube Screamer. And then we can listen to the lead that's more riffy. And that's a arbiter stacked on top of a clone, stacked on top of a screamer. And you can hear my sloppy playing, but altogether it sounds pretty good to my ears. So we have, you know, chilled out overdrive. And then what you traditionally think overdrive for, like heavy distorto guitars and leads. And the Overdrive Essentials package is up to the task for sure. Now let's nitpick it a little bit. It does, I think, consume more resources than traditional white box emulation, as Victor from Fazertone would call it. I think it's using a bit more system resources. However, I usually don't stack 18 distortion pedals on one project, so that might be the issue. Who knows? Also, he said he's working on making it more efficient all the time, so we got to take him at his word. Secondly, I do wish there were a way to chain pedals. So on this lead section here, I have, you know, this arbiter running into this clone, running into this screamer. And it would be nice if I could just have one plug-in interface for all three where I could just chain them together. But until that day comes, we'll just add an individual instance for each specific pedal. It would also be nice in Cubase, and this is just a nitpick that's neither here nor there, if you could put a new name on each of these inserts. Wouldn't that be nice? If I could name this one Arbiter, this one Clone, this one Screamer. I would love that. Okay, but that is your first look at the Fazertone Overdrive Essentials packages from Fazertone. It's available. I'll leave a link in the description to the website if you want to check it out yourself. I think that it's a fantastic new step forward, implementing new technology into VST plugins, and I'm excited to see what happens next. If the Overdrive pedals sound this good, I'm excited to hear what the amp emulations may sound like. So if I had a suggestion for Fazertone, it would say, make an amp emulation. I'd love to see it. And that's all I got for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to play out this little composition I made because I had fun making it for the outro, and you guys take care of yourselves. Peace.